So after the use of tanks, new innovations, new way of fighting the war, the Battle of the Somme was finally won. It dragged on until November, but at the end of that, it was a British victory. We achieved what we set out to do. But that victory came at an enormous cost. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers were killed or wounded. And there's no better place to remember them than here, the Thiepval Memorial to the Missing. There's more than 72,000 names on this memorial, just the missing. These were the men who have no known grave. And the fact that this memorial is here at all is reflective of a really forward-thinking decision that was made by British authorities after the war. They wanted every man to be remembered by name, whether that was on a headstone or on a memorial such as this one. So now across the Western Front, we see huge memorials carved with individual names of soldiers whose graves were never found. The important thing to remember when you look at these memorials and read these names is every one of these names is a lost man. Every name represents a grieving family, a community who'd lost someone, a life never really fulfilled. It's really special to come here, to walk around, to read the thousands of names on memorials like this one, and just think about the huge cost of these battles. The entire memorial is covered in these huge tablets, each one bearing thousands of names, and the names are laid out in a very specific order. They're laid out by regiment and then by rank, and then they're alphabetical with each person's name. Often, in the case of names like this, two soldiers with the same name and the same initial would then have their regimental number to differentiate them from each other. So the point of this was that grieving families could come here and find their missing soldier. This wasn't invented for us. This wasn't built so that we could come and remember a century later. This was built for grieving families, and the idea was they would come over from England, they would come here, they would find the regiment that their son belonged to, and they would find his name on the wall. And there was a real feeling that this was a connection with their son, that their son wasn't missing after all, but he was right here on this memorial. I think it's absolutely touching. This memorial opened in the 1930s, and it was controversial from the start. Lots of people didn't like it. It was described as a big red heap of bricks on top of the hill. And I can see why people think that. I can see that it's certainly confronting. It doesn't fit in with the more sedate, the more solemn memorials that you see on other parts of the battlefields. But you know, I've always liked it. I think it's great. I think we do need a big memorial like this that stands out and shouts to the world about the missing of the Somme. They're important, and their stories are important that we tell. And on a great memorial like this one, where we've got the names of famous battles, Albert, Somme 1916, Guillemont, all the famous British battles, all the British men brought together. I think that's a story worth telling, and they do it very, very well here. I'm always in two minds when I think of the Battle of the Somme, because it's hard to get past those immense losses, the tragedy of the first day, the hundreds of thousands of men killed or wounded. But at the end of the day, it was a victory. This was a British victory, and from this point onwards, the Germans realised they would not win the First World War. But in some ways, I think trying to remember the battle in terms of statistics or strategy or outcomes is really missing the point, because that history, as important as it is, it belongs to the past. There's a reality that belongs to the present, however, and that's these names. That's the men who are recorded here, the men who are recorded in the cemetery behind me. That's the real story that belongs to today. And these men still have stories to tell. They still have lessons to teach us. The only question is, do we have the determination and the courage to hear them?
I'm Mat McLachlan, and thanks for watching Living History TV. Don't forget to subscribe for more great history content.